And I was told on my first day, take your mental health hat off and don't look for problems.
Oh.
So, of course, I failed miserably with
How
that.
can you do that?
Exactly.
Like, these are human beings.
Exactly.
With a mind and as well as a body. So how could you do that?
And when I started, I wanted to change everything.
Yeah.
And, of course, I got branded a troublemaker.
Yeah. Tell us something that you remember, some difference that you made. It was always about finding out what the patient wanted. Yeah. So, Bel, I would like to welcome you to the Martina Tierney Podcast. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much, Martina. I'm really, really pleased to be here as well and quite humbled to see what you've achieved here.
Oh, thank you very much. So we met at an OT conference earlier this year, wasn't that it? The first time we met at
in Edinburgh, yes, at the Members' Day.
That's right, the Members' Day. So obviously we were impressed with you and your story and your experience, and we thought it would be really good to have you here. So just a wee word about your name. That was a bit of a debate. So your name is Bel Youngson.
Yes.
Yeah. I have never heard that name before, and I believe it's from Aberdeen.
That's right. Yes, there's lots and lots of Youngsons in Aberdeen, but you're not alone because nobody else has ever heard of it either, apart from up in the northeast of Scotland.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
So, Bel, you've been an occupational therapist for a long time. So even I think maybe longer than me. No. Oh my goodness!
I'm probably older than you, but I did my training much later in life.
Oh, right.
So I was actually 40 when I trained.
Very good.
Yeah, so I've been an occupational therapist. Yeah, so I finished my training in 2000 and I've just retired a year ago.
All right. So you've been an occupational therapist for 25 years. Oh, very good. So tell us a little bit about your journey, how you started, and why at 40 did you want to become an OT?
Okay. So I actually was interested in doing occupational therapy when I was 17 at school, and I went to the London School of Occupational Therapy to find out all about it. And that was going to be my career. And then I changed schools at that time, and I went to a school where hardly anybody had been to university, and I was under pressure to go to university because at that time occupational therapy wasn't a degree.
Yes.
So I succumbed to the pressure and didn't do occupational therapy then. But I always had it in my mind that it would be something I wanted to do. So I did lots of other things.
So what did you do your degree in then?
Psychology.
All right, okay, very good.
Yeah.
That was also a useful
Yes, very useful.
Foundation for occupational therapy.
And then I did lots of different jobs. I worked in London for 5 years. I was an MP secretary. I worked in the Tate Gallery. I worked for an organisation that promoted exchanges with China and did a lot of travelling, did a lot of mountaineering. And so to cut a long story short, I moved to Cumbria in 96 and I went to a dance class which was run by an occupational therapist. And she said, you can still do your training. So I just went for it.
So this was still something that was in your mind that you just hadn't.
Yeah.
Well, I think bringing all that wealth of experience, your degree, your travel, everything really, really had a very positive impact on your career. Like you're coming in with all that experience rather than starting at 17. Do you not think?
I do think so. And I think it made it much easier to talk to people because I'd had quite a lot of life experience then. And I was a bit older. And I think some patients respond to a sort of more mature person.
Yes, very good.
And actually, the best training I had for one part of my career, I was a financial advisor with the Prudential, and we did a lot of role play of going into people's houses and talking about their families and why they might need insurance, and that actually was fantastic training for occupational therapy.
Yeah, for doing that initial interview and finding things out. Yeah,
absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah. So you trained then 90, what year was that? 90?
So 97 to
2000. Yeah. So what was your first job then?
So my first job was in mental health. I worked with people with long-term and enduring mental health issues, and I loved that. But there was kind of nowhere to go from there. So I then moved into hospital work, working with older people. And I was told on my first day, take your mental health hat off and don't look for problems.
Oh.
So, of course, I failed miserably with
How
that.
can you do that?
Exactly.
These are human beings.
Exactly.
With a mind and
Yeah.
as well as a body. So
Yeah.
how could you do that?
I know, but that's part of the culture.
Yeah.
That, you know, that kind of set me off my journey to change things, really.
Yeah.
So I kept my mental health hat and I kept looking for issues. And so I worked with older people in acute hospitals, and then eventually I went into stroke care. I specialised in stroke.
Okay, right. So when did you make the transition then from into education? Was that a long time after that?
Yes, yeah. I was in practice for 12 years, and then I went to do a PhD. And I didn't mean to do a PhD. It wasn't part of my plan, but I was working on the stroke ward where I did a lot of improvements and, you know, did a lot of group work and, you know, I really loved it. But one day I just got this thought, why are we spending all our resources and our time after someone's had a stroke? You know, what can we do to prevent people having a stroke in the first place? And that kind of set me on a different journey. And it just so happened at the time that had that thought. And, you know, once you have that thought, it doesn't go, does it? You keep it there. And there were quite a few people on the ward who had uncontrolled diabetes. And so that set me on a path of thinking, well, as occupational therapists, we should be able to look at diabetes. Why are people not managing? What is it about their lifestyle and their occupations? So that set me off on research to look at how do people manage their diabetes, because it's such a big thing in life. And so I wasn't able to do that research still in the NHS, so I left and pursued that.
Through which university did you?
Through the University of Cumbria.
Okay.
And while I was doing the research, which I absolutely loved, I did quite a lot of teaching. And so that sort of segued into going into education.
So you really went into, it wasn't that you went into education and then decided to do research. You went because you wanted to do the research, is that right, into the diabetes. Yeah. So what was the outcome? What was your PhD? What did you find or what did you discover about on how as occupational therapists we can impact someone or help someone with diabetes? Because it's not an area that I as an OT have thought about, you know. So tell us a bit more about that.
It's such an interesting area. Most occupational therapists see people with diabetes at the end of their journey, you know, when they're having problems with circulation and, you know, amputations and that sort of thing. So what I was interested in was looking at, well, what does it mean to have diabetes? How does it affect all your occupations? How do you manage it? Because there are so many different aspects to it. It might be managing your medication. It might be the occupations you do, which impacts on your blood sugar levels. And basically, I was just exploring everybody's experience of diabetes, so what it meant to be living with diabetes. And then that was the first part. And then I interviewed occupational therapists who had diabetes to look at what their perspective was. So if they were kind of occupational therapizing themselves, you know, what would they look at? And so that, and I used a lot of metaphor in my research. So I was asking people to give me a metaphor of what it meant to them to have diabetes, so as a way of exploring that life experience. So again, that brought up some really interesting things about the real importance of understanding how diabetes fitted in people's lives and their occupations. And then from there, the third part of my research was then, okay, well, what do people want? You know, if you are living with diabetes, what do you want from your health service? You know, what would really support you to...
And what did you discover were the main things that people wanted?
Being listened to is such a big thing. I mean, it comes up time and time again, doesn't it, that you want someone to listen to you. And then to really to understand that it's not just a medical condition, it's part of somebody's life.
It's a whole lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to be able to understand that. So for an example, I spoke to one chap who had type 2 diabetes, and he was given metformin to take, but he had to take it with a meal. And because he was in a job where he didn't have regular meal times, he was out in the community, he didn't take his medication. And it's just a simple thing like that. Whereas if you had a conversation about somebody's lifestyle and say, well, you can't have that kind of medication, it won't work. There's another one that you could take and that would fit into somebody's lifestyle.
Because as an OT, I would always have thought, when you ask the question, what's your medical condition, diabetes, I would always have presumed that was a medical problem or a nursing. And obviously you'd looked at, as you say, at the end stage, the amputation, transfers, all that. But I never would have thought of it as something that an OT could impact early on, which is something different to think about.
Because often you need to think about what's your day going to look like? When are you going to take your medication? If you need to check your blood sugar levels and you do certain activities like swimming or hiking or something, trying to work out what medication you might need to take before or after, and also to understand how you're feeling, and is the way I'm feeling at the moment, is that diabetes or is it something else that's going on in my life? And it is very, very complex. So occupational therapists are absolutely there to help people to make sense of it, and how one occupation might impact on another occupation that might impact on a condition.
So are there many occupational therapists that you're aware of that would be involved with diabetic care? No. So
only in the end stages.
Only in the end stages. So this is something. So Bel, have you found, are there many occupational therapists that are involved with diabetic care? No, not just the equipment and in the early stages.
No, I didn't find any. And I think a lot of people did see it as a medical condition.
Yes.
And would obviously do the aids and equipment at the end. And I've been in touch with some people who have wanted to develop that role. So over the years, I've had people from working in GP surgeries who've said, what can we do?
Yeah.
So I think it's getting more recognition now. And certainly it is in America.
Yeah. So it's an emerging role, really?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. Very good. So you didn't do what you were told? You didn't just not stop looking for problems? You decided you were going to look for problems and solutions. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So we were talking earlier, about your passions. What, as an OT, what is your passion, or what would you like to see transformed within OT? What is the one thing or two things?
Well, several things.
Yeah.
I've loved every part of my occupational therapy career. It's been amazing, But the things that I'm really passionate about are really changing practice for the benefit of patients and clients. There's an awful lot, especially in acute care, there's a lot of custom and practice. I think occupational therapists often get put into little boxes and told to do discharge planning. And what I wanted to do was to put evidence into practice, to bring the occupation back into occupational therapy, so that we were, seeing our clients and patients as occupational beings, and because that's our unique role.
Yeah.
So that we would look at, what do people want to do, what's important to them, what's expected of them, and not just, put them in a box and do a kitchen assessment and say, well, they can go home now, whatever, but to actually really look at what was important, and to bring in quite a lot of that occupational therapy theory that we learn about at university, and to put that into practice, that we're actually using occupational therapy models which enable us to see people as occupational beings.
How do you think we can do that better?
Yeah.
And what are what causes us not to be able to do that?
Yeah.
Time restraints? What is it, and how can we do it better?
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to say I haven't got time to do things. And certainly when I started to, what I did was introduce the model of human occupation into the hospital.
Yeah.
And it was easy to say, we haven't got time for this. So what I found was doing a lot of education with the team in the hospital, starting off with the occupational therapy team, and just looking at how if we see people as occupational beings and not just the person in bed 7, which sometimes happens, and looking at what was important to them and getting that inspiration from the client as well, and agency for them, that actually in the end it did speed up discharge because we looked at what was really important. And it's customer and practice is so strong, especially if you're an early occupational therapist. You go into your team and people say, this is the way we do things. And it's to have that thought, actually, can we do things better? Can we treat our clients or our patients as people? And
so you want to really, I just want to butt on there a wee bit because I want to get this. You want to really inspire the new OTs, the students coming out, the OTs coming out, to not just fit in to what's already there. For them to think, no, use the theory that they've had, use the training to do things better. I put it on there, but I needed to get that. Is that what you...
Absolutely, yeah. And I appreciate how difficult it can be. And I would say that, when I started, I wanted to change everything. And of course, I got branded a troublemaker.
Sounds familiar to me too.
And so that absolutely wasn't the right way to go. And so what I learned from that is to start small. And I think if you're a newly qualified occupational therapist, you can say, I'd just like to do a little project to see if, we could do this, or, maybe we could start a breakfast club, and maybe we could just do things a little differently. And it's important to find your allies, because sometimes you might not have an occupational therapy manager, or you might have, and that maybe isn't what their focus is. So you need to find people. It might be other professions, other people in the hierarchy of the organisation who want to see things improving. And occupational therapy is such a good place to start that improvement.
So you want to encourage students, and hopefully we have students listening to this, with new recruits listening to this, you want to encourage them to step out and look at things different, look at the person as a whole, use the model of human, like self-care, productivity, leisure, not just looking at one thing, and to be a bit braver.
And the way you can do that without spending any extra money and not having any extra staff is actually to have students. So I started by having students coming on role emerging placements in a traditional setting. So I had students who came to develop our group work, for example. So all you need to do is speak to your local university and make sure you're meeting all the targets for that placement. And it was highly successful because we could get people to look at the evidence behind groups. We haven't got time to do that necessarily on the ward, but they can do that as part of their placement. We also had volunteers from outside of occupational therapy as well. So most organisations have a voluntary organisation part, and often it's people giving out teas and coffees, but actually speak to that part of the organisation, say, can I bring in some volunteers? So we had like an artist who came and did some work in art with our clients.
And these clients, just to be clear, these clients were not necessarily mental health clients. These were clients with stroke or diabetes or,
all
general.
Of those things, So it was on a hospital ward.
You also mentioned earlier that about you worked with like a charity shop. Tell me a little bit about that project. That sounded really interesting.
Yeah. So we ran a lot of groups on the ward to bring the people together so they could encourage each other to kind of get that sense of self back again, which you often lose after something really chronic like a stroke. And I was at a conference one year and I heard a chap give this really inspiring talk about a charity shop group, and he was working in mental health, and he was kind of running out of ideas of what to do with his clients. And he walked past a charity shop one day and saw in the window it was a doll's house, but it was half made, And he thought, went into the shop and he said, can I take that doll's house and work with my clients to, repaint it, put all the furniture in and all the rest of it, and then we'll give it back to you and you can sell it. So this is what he did with his clients. And I was so inspired by that. I thought, well, we could do that. So we went around all the charity shops in the town and said, we're working with people with a stroke on the ward. What have you got that needs sorting or checking or polishing and so we developed quite a good relationship with those charity shops, and we would bring things onto the ward and use them as rehab. Yeah. So if people needed to, cross the midline or they maybe needed to remember things or they had language issues, we would just use all of these things in the group. So we'd get old farmers polishing brasses and talking about life as a farmer. We'd have people doing jigsaws and who hadn't done a jigsaw for years, and then their relatives and visitors would help out. And we might have people sorting buttons, which again is a really good thing for doing after a stroke.
And there's so much there, like you're talking about fine finger, you're talking about, organisation, different sizes, different colours.
Yeah, all of those things. Yeah. And people were doing it together in a group. There might have been 6 or 8 in the group, and they'd be encouraging each other. And then we would take those items back to the charity shop, and they would send us a letter saying, thanks to the work that people on the ward have done here, we've raised £35 or whatever for a well in Africa or whatever it is. And for the people on the ward who often felt, life had just kind of gone by, they were suddenly making a difference. So rather than just being a sort of recipient of services and being quite passive.
A patient.
Yeah, they were actually giving something back. Yeah. And just seeing that transformation was just amazing.
It's funny because in the book that you have in front of you there, The Power of OT, and we interviewed a number of OTs, and all of the OTs that contributed, they said that was what was really most meaningful to them, was finding what was important to the patient. And when I told them, tell us something that you remember, some difference that you made, it was always about finding out what the patient wanted, what the person wanted, and then working on that rather than imposing, I think this is what you need to be doing. Absolutely. So I think we need to remember as OTs to always do that, to ask what's important to them, and treat them like a full person, not just someone with a stroke.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we did was we had an interest checklist. So we went around the ward to see what everyone's interests were, so that we could then start our groups. And so we started off with gardening, and then we moved into the charity shop group. We had an art group, and we had a very inspirational music group as well, because at that time there were people who were really into music. Yeah.
Are you musical, Bel?
Well, I did take up the clarinet at school and then played the flute, and for a very short time played in a little folk band. I don't play anymore, but I love folk music. I sing and dance in the kitchen. Go to a lot of folk concerts. Right. And so we started a music group on the ward, on the stroke ward, because I was lucky enough to meet a teacher who was just retiring, and she had lots of really interesting instruments, quite a lot of them from Africa, things that you shake and bang and all the rest of it. And so we started a music group on the ward to enable people to communicate who couldn't otherwise. You could just, and there was one lady who was really frustrated about having a stroke, and I gave her some cymbals. Bang, bang, bang. I mean, it was amazing. She, really got her frustration out, but I did have to take them off.
You had to limit the time.
But in the music group, we did a lot of sort of communication and, again, for fine finger movement and, crossing the midline, different instruments. And we finished each group with just some really lovely music. And sometimes we just all sat there and cried. because again, it was just, music's just so amazing for your emotions, and it just gave people permission to feel what they'd lost, and and we would all sit there and cry, and people said, "What are you doing?" But it was just so, just an amazing time, just to sort of let go as well.
Yeah,
and for whatever disability somebody had from a stroke, we would incorporate that. So sometimes people would just come in who, were really quite severely affected by the stroke, but just sitting in a chair, in a very good chair like yours, and listening to music. You could see their faces lighting up, and it was just so powerful
and so therapeutic. Yeah.
The
benefit of music. Yeah.
Yes.
So now, are you completely retired, Bel? Because you've said you've retired and you've come back and you've retired. So what are you doing right now?
Right. So right now, I am officially retired. I actually collect my pension this month,
Right.
and my bus pass. But I can't let go. I can't let go completely. So I am still supporting some PhD students. I've been supervising other PhDs, helping people to write journal articles. And from my old university, I'm still, as much as they'll let me, be part of developing modules. And next month I'm going in to be a patient for students to interview.
Oh, very good. So tell me about what you do now in your spare time, because we were chatting earlier, you're here in beautiful Northern Ireland, and you have been swimming and walking. Tell us a little bit about your hobbies.
Yeah.
Because as an OT, like you're not just an OT.
No. I am an OT absolutely through and through, but I do so many different things, and it's such a beautiful area here. Honestly, it's never been on my radar, and I'm so thrilled.
The Northern Ireland Tourist Board love this podcast.
Yeah. So the coastal scenery is absolutely outstanding, and so we've been walking and swimming. But apart from that, I have an allotment that I share with my husband, and it's at the bottom of our garden, which is quite handy. So that's quite a full-time job. And then for my own well-being as well, so we go swimming, I weave, anything to do with yarn. So I do wool hooking and weaving and crochet, and I paint, and
And you walk.
and I walk.
So have you done any volunteering since you sort of retired? Have you thought about that? Because a lot of OTs end up doing something in voluntary work.
Yeah, I've had lots of people ask me to volunteer, and a friend of mine who's a retired occupational therapist said, don't agree to anything for a year. Just see what it's like. Yeah. And it was really sound advice, actually, because although I do so many different things, the transition into retirement has been interesting. Yeah.
Have you found it challenging?
A little bit, yeah. I think you lose some of your identity. When you're a lecturer or when you're a practitioner, there's a definite structure to your day, and I didn't realise how different that would be not having that structure. Thinking, because some days I've been sort of paralysed by choice. I could do this, I could do that, because I've got so many things I want to do.
Yeah.
So I think it has taken a year to kind of think, oh, I'm still me, and I can still do all these things. And I think what I'd like to do, I don't know whether this exists at the moment, but I would really love to support people in practice to make a change, just on a voluntary basis.
Well, I think that would be amazing, because I really think as OTs we need to get back to that, that we're too much in that area of just, sorting out a problem to get someone discharged, sorting out a problem to get someone out of bed. We're not looking at the whole, we're not really using our profession the way it should. So I think that would be amazing. Yeah. But just what you said there sounded, you said that you felt that you lost your identity, that isn't that what happens to people after a traumatic illness or a traumatic injury, and wouldn't it be good if as OTs that we recognise that before we retired, that the people that we're dealing with, when they have a traumatic incident, that they have lost their identity. They feel that they're not useless, that they're not contributing, and as OTs, we can really help them get that identity back, make them feel useful by doing some of the activities that you talked about, which was amazing.
Absolutely.
So you're sort of feeling a wee bit just temporarily, because you'll soon find you'll get your balance again of where you're supposed to go.
Well, my brother, who's a doctor in New Zealand, and he started the compassion in medicine movement in New Zealand. And so he's come over to Britain quite a lot, and I've nabbed him to speak to our students. And
is that a thing, compassionate medicine?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Well, often medicine isn't compassionate.
No.
And his daughter had a really severe road accident when she was 18, and he saw things from the other side then. He was an anaesthetist, and seeing processes and practices when it's your daughter and not getting the care she needed, that led him to start a movement in compassion in medicine in New Zealand. So I've been really influenced by that. And there were, lots of lovely pockets. But one area that I came across through him was something called emotional touch points. Have you come across that? So it's actually a nurse-led initiative where they'd look at the patient's journey through hospital. So going into hospital, when you might just wake up in hospital, and the emotion of that, and wondering where you are and what's going to happen. And then things that we take for granted, like going to the toilet, if you're a patient in the hospital and thinking, how do I do that? If I ring the bell, is anybody going to come? And then what happens when we go for appointments? So emotional touch points is just such a powerful way of being with your clients or your patients, looking at the journey and what happens at those points: meal times, toilet times, discharge, appointments. And so we use that also on the ward to look at the journey that people are going through, rather than doing a sort of friends and family test. It was looking at what's happening at those times. And so people were able to say, I felt really worried when I was suddenly told I was going for a scan, because then they'd think, oh, do I need to go to the toilet before I go? And what's going to happen when I get there? And I'm left in a corridor, and I don't know how long I'm going to be there. And sometimes people were asked to undress and they couldn't because of their stroke. So it was just a way of looking at all those different aspects of the journey, which, of course, being part of the system and being one of the members of staff, you might not be aware of.
Did you use that as training, the emotional touch point? Did you train staff in how to use it?
What we did was actually just used it with our clients patients on the ward. Yeah, so it was a kind of like a discussion group, so that then we could make changes to what was going on. So if somebody, so the staff nurse might know that somebody is going to go for an appointment tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and the first time the patient would know about that was
when the porter arrived.
Yeah. So we could change that to then explain to the person, this is what's going to happen, and you're going to be taken to this place, and you'll be there for however long, and we'll make sure if you need to go to the toilet before that, we can do that. So things like that, and things like mealtimes. Mealtimes can be very worrying for people. So again, it's just understanding that and hearing that from the patients, and actually being able to explain what's going to happen, or know about their food preferences. Because, sometimes people will put a meal in front of somebody and they might not even see it. So they don't eat it, and it's taken away again, and people think you're not hungry.
Hungry,
yeah.
Is that something you can look up, emotional touch points?
Yes, yeah. So the main author of that is a woman. Her surname is Dewar, Dewar, and they've written, in fact, I've got the reference here if you want it.
Dewar. What's your brother's name?
Robin Youngson.
Youngson.
Yeah. So if you
And he's still in Australia?
New Zealand.
Oh, New Zealand.
Yeah, he is, yes. I'm going to see him in December.
Oh, very good. But just sort of to finish off, what would you say to someone that is going to choose a career now? Why would you tell them to be an OT?
I think it's it's a unique occupation in itself, where you just get to work with people on the things that are really important to them. I think that's why it's just such a brilliant career. And you can work in all sorts of different areas. So I know in the book a lot of the time you talk about finding your passion, and occupational therapy is one of those professions where you can try lots of different things and then find your passion. Yeah. And there's something just humbling about working with people to help them achieve what they want to do and what's important to them. And sometimes even introducing people to new things. So I've done a lot of art and craft in education as well as in practice. And, people have been inspired. Even on the ferry on the way over here, I was doing some wool hooking and a woman came over and said, "What are you doing?" And, I explained to her what I was doing. She said, "Oh, this is really inspiring. I think I'll go and have a look at this." So, it's having that ability and to actually make that connection with people and help them to find what they want.
And finally, to the OTs who are working every day, they're feeling a bit, disillusioned, but as a lot of them are, because we did a survey there last year and we found that there was quite low morale. Yeah. What would you say to those people to try to boost the morale?
Yeah, get in touch with me, and I'm just here to help people to, look at how you can not improve things just for your clients, but also for yourself. You just, when you're making a difference and you're not just doing what someone else is saying you should be doing, that also increases your own, your own self-value and makes the job so much more interesting. And I would really encourage people to, remember why they did all the things they did in their training, and to start to even think about how could you make a difference, how could you change things. So get in touch with your local university, speak to the lecturers who would be, more than willing to help, to also, bring in more students, to do things that aren't traditional, to look at the evidence, to write your group plan, to give you that that sort of inspiration to do occupation. Yeah.
So, that is a problem that we have at the moment, is getting placements for students. Yes. So rather than looking at students as extra work for the department, or for, looking at, I haven't time to bring on students, turn that round and say, listen, students could be such an advantage to us. Yeah. They could do X, Y, and Z. They can do a bit of research. They can do a bit. So let's turn that round and not just look at students as being extra work to take on. Look at them as being something to add value to the department, to your work. So maybe when this podcast goes out, that would be a message that we would like to get out there. Look at students as a benefit as opposed to extra work in your department.
Absolutely. I mean, they're a resource. They've got access to, libraries and, all the journals that sometimes when you go into practice, you feel like you've had an arm cut off because you don't have that anymore. Yeah. We also took on students who were waiting for a job. So they'd graduated, they were waiting for their jobs. Yeah. And again, they were just fantastic to bring in as volunteers to help run groups. And again, another resource. Costs nothing. Yeah.
And we need the OTs to come out with that experience, with that, we need good OTs for the future. So it is our responsibility as OTs to encourage the students and to bring them out and help them. So I think the message that I've got from you, and you can agree or disagree, is that we have to be braver.
Yes, absolutely.
And we have to not be afraid to, within reason, to step outside the boundaries and not do things the way they've always done just because that's the way it's always been done, just to look at things broader. Yeah. And not to take the advice that you were given as don't look for problems. Yeah. Look for problems and try to solve them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Would you
need
agree?
To be brave. Yeah, I agree. And it is difficult because there is an awful lot of pressure not to be brave often. And that's why I think it's really important to have somebody that, might be outside the organisation or might be inside, that you can sort of have these ideas, share them, and look at starting small, definitely.
Well, Bel, you are certainly an inspiration, and when this podcast goes out, you could get lots of phone calls.
I hope so.
And you're there. You're a great addition to the occupational therapy ward, and I'm glad that after all those years of thinking about being an OT, that you actually decided to go down that route. And it's amazing that stayed with you from age 17 to 40 almost, that idea that you wanted to be an OT. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've really enjoyed talking to you and look forward to meeting up with you again and seeing what you've been doing in your retirement.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it as well.
That's good.
Yeah.